Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Haven't enjoyed your day so far, and today we're going to talk about a very interesting possibility that could have come true at the start of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare season when franchising kicked into effect. If Hector didn't make the deal with Andy Miller to join NRG as a co-CEO, he may have joined forces with his old friend Hastro over at the Team Envy side, and instead of the Dallas Empire being formed and the Chicago Huntsmen being formed, there may have been a combined team in the OpTic Dallas. Pretty remarkable to think about, and some of the implications of this that we're going to go into in some detail today. Intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below for sure. Like if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Really helps out the channel. Thank you very much for doing that. Let's set the scene very quickly then. So a couple of weeks ago now, Hector then comes out and confirms that, well, OpTic Gaming is back in his hands, and he's been trying to make this happen for a couple of years, right? Ever since the acquisition, I suppose, to Infinite Esports and Entertainment went somewhat sour in the 2018 days or so. So, well, he comes out with this podcast with Hitch, and they talk in quite some length about the truth behind the OpTic deal. I'll link the entire thing down below because there's a number of interesting snippets in this, but I wanted to bring out the OpTic Dallas stuff, which, was a pretty remarkable opportunity. So certainly Hector's been trying to get this back for a number of different years, and after the Infinite stuff kind of went, in a difficult direction, and they ended up selling into Immortals and getting acquired by Immortals, Hex was pretty, keen to just buy it straight back off Infinite Esports and Entertainment then and there. So this was the discussion in the early part of October when this deal was initially leaked, and as our Esports Observer says, in June of 2019, Immortals Gaming Club acquired Infinite Esports Entertainment, parent company of OpTic Gaming and the Houston Outlaws, in a deal valued at $100 million. Rodriguez then left OpTic Gaming in September of that year to become co-CEO of NRG. The Houston Outlaws were then later sold to Beasley Media Group in November. So that's kind of a timeline of how things went. Year prior to this, then the whole Infinite Esports and Entertainment acquisition of OpTic Gaming was kind of happening. Hector still had equity in OpTic Gaming at the time, but it wasn't enough to make overarching decisions, and he was of course very keen to get his baby back under his control like he's managed to do now, and as well has obviously been trying to do this for a couple of different years, because in June of 2019 Immortals make this acquisition, but Hector was also pretty keen to get it done, and after it was not possible to get it done, he was then considering his other opportunities for how can he still get involved in the Call of Duty League and at some point get OpTic back under his domain. And what he talks about in this clip in here in just a second that we're going to share, the fact that, if he was able to get OpTic Gaming back in terms of the brands, the intellectual property, I suppose, as he's managed to do now, if that was able to be happening a year earlier without the Immortals acquisition and then that move into OpTic Gaming Los Angeles, then he may well have joined forces with Hastro on the Team Envy side to create OpTic Dallas as that organization. We talked a few days ago as well about how Hector was kind of keen to create this super team between FaZe, 100 Thieves, Sidemen, and OpTic to kind of dominate the Call of Duty League. There could have been something somewhat similar going on with the E-Clasico OpTic versus Envy actually joining forces as the OpTic Dallas.
We waited a couple of months, and then all of a sudden I hear that that it's up for grabs. It's being sold, and they hired people to sell this thing. And immediately I go find a group, and I'm like, hey, I need to buy this thing. And they were like, okay, we have your back. Absolutely, let's do it. So we put in an offer, and then we put in a separate offer. I put in three different offers when the Immortals thing was going on.
Right.
One where I teamed back up with Chris Cheney,
right,
who at the time was, not at the time, but before that was like one of the main reasons why this thing, I didn't want to be there anymore. But as once that once he stepped away from Infinite, waited a couple of months, and then we reached out to each other and we had a conversation. We had coffee, and we said, I'm like, look, man, like, I'm not mad at you. It was business, I understand, and you can understand from my perspective. This was more than business to me, so you can understand why I was acting crazy. Well, all of us were acting crazy. So he and I were gonna put in a bid, and then on the other side, Hastro, Envy, and I were putting also in a bid to be the Dallas team. We were going to be OpTic Dallas.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, we were going to be OpTic Dallas, and everything was going to be all honky-dory and all that. And ultimately, I continued to weigh my options. No. So at that point, that's when it sold, right? That's when it sold to Immortals. And from there, I thought it was gone forever. You know what I mean? I thought it was gone forever. Because there was no chance in no other world that I think that a situation like that can happen.
Twice.
So I don't know. The stars lined up for me.
Yeah.
So of course, in a similar vein to now OpTic Chicago is the team with Huntsman being retired, OpTic Dallas was at least in discussions for a time, but well, after Immortals did make the acquisition of Infinite Esports Entertainment and then OpTic Gaming, Hector was kind of left out in the sidelines and then actually decided to leave the organization in its entirety and then join NRG in September or so of 2019. But he's talked a couple of times now that the option was on the table. He was talking to, well, Banks and some of the FaZe guys, also talking to Hastro as well on the Team Envy side, potentially joining those guys. Now, well, that could have been an incredibly different landscape that we look at from the competitive scene. In my opinion, a much worse one, right? It's great to see from my perspective as a competitive Call of Duty fan that you've got OpTic Gaming in the league now as OpTic Chicago. You've got Dallas Empire, the Envy team. You've got the FaZe team. You've got the LA Thieves team. This season is just going to be great, and it's great to see that those guys didn't like join forces in that sense, because now the rivalries are well and truly underway. But what I personally think is very interesting about this is how exactly this team might have been run, right? Like if OpTic Dallas was a thing, and you've got Hastro with the Team Envy side, and you've got kind of Hector joining on board as a co-CEO of like Team Envy, I suppose, which is just so weird to see, but then still owns the OpTic Gaming intellectual property in a similar way how he's now like co-CEO of NRG, but still owns OpTic Gaming in its entirety as his own brands, and then almost like leasing out the OpTic brand in a sense to NRG and potentially to Envy to use it as the name of their team. Interesting that Hastro would have been able to, would have been happy to go along with this, right? Because as he joins NRG right here, if I'm sure Hector would have wanted the OpTic Gaming brand to stay, would Hastro have been happy to have, okay, like, I'll have Dallas and it's still technically Envy, but our team is going to be called OpTic, like the team that, we've had a great rivalry over a number of different years. Would Hastro have been particularly happy with that ton of events? Maybe not. And also I imagine that Hex would have been, well, very much keen indeed to have decent control over how the team was run. I think really this is the question, right? What would an OpTic Dallas have looked like if that was the team? I'm sure Hastro has his ideas of how he wants to build a roster. Hex certainly has his ideas of how he wants to build a roster. And I believe that, well, I imagine Scump, where else would he have gone but OpTic Dallas if that was a team for the Call of Duty League 2020 into Modern Warfare? I'm sure Scump would have been on this team, but Hastro has been very keen for a number of years to get Crimsix playing on his organizations, right? And well, there was, of course, the drama between Crimsix and Scump. At the end of the Call of Duty Black Ops 4 season, they certainly had their disagreements, didn't necessarily see eye to eye, and want a team together next year. So I think there would have been some conflict here, really, between what Hex wanted to do in terms of building a roster, I imagine, around Scump and Formal, and then Hastro kind of wanting Crimsix. Maybe they just put together the dynasty, right, and tell them to figure out their distant differences. Who really knows? But yeah, this is what the teams did end up looking like last season. Of course, you had Scump, Formal, RCs, Envoy and Pristini, Clay, Shotzi, Hook, Illy and Crimsix. Dallas Empire, of course, went on to win the World Championship last year. And very much, I mean, it's very clear that Hex and Hastro have different mindsets in terms of how they look at their teams. We talked a number of times about the content versus championships thing, where even though OpTic Gaming over their career do have more championships, Envy do have a better result at the World Championship. And, well, this season, I think you kind of saw that in full effect. I mean, we did see some issues arising on the Huntsman side from streaming scrims a lot, whereas Dallas Empire are absolutely winning first every single step of the way, whereas the Huntsmen have a more balanced approach. So winning is obviously important, but content is kind of number one. And Hex and Hastro have always kind of had maybe that disagreement on exactly how they view esports franchising more generally, and I feel like that might have been a rather difficult thing to resolve if they were actually to have joined forces, right? And okay, we've got a 5 versus 5 situation. What would their team have looked like if he wasn't able to get Crimsix because Hex was really keen to have Scump and Formula? I think if you're Hastro at the end of the day and you've got the opportunity to have Scump and Formula on your team, you've probably just got to say, okay, fair play, let's just run with this. And yeah, maybe it would have looked more like the Huntsman team than a Dallas Empire team, but it could be a mix of the two, right? And somehow you have like Huntsman with Scump and Formal, but then joining forces with like Shotzi, Ukanili. I don't really know. That could have been pretty disgusting, I'm sure. But the entire landscape of the scene would have completely changed. I mean, these guys would have had to go to another team, the ones that weren't on the OpTic Dallas. There'd have been another ownership group coming into play if NRG weren't there. I mean, who could that potentially have been? And then the Dallas Empire winning the World Championship here. Would they have done so if it was the OpTic Dallas at the time? I mean, who really knows, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, and how, well, in my opinion, this wouldn't have been a great thing for competitive Call of Duty, because two of the biggest brands in the Call of Duty arena, instead of going head to head like they have done for the last decade, would now be joining forces along each other's side. And it could have had, of course, massive implications for what the league even looks like today. And I think as it has transpired, it's gone into a pretty good direction, where we've got the FaZe team, we've got the Dallas Empire as this kind of separate entity, the reigning world champions. I mean, a great branding in my opinion as well. Then we've got the Los Angeles Thieves, and now instead of as it could have been OpTic Dallas in 2020, it's now going to be OpTic Chicago in 2021 as Hector was finally able to reacquire that intellectual property back from Immortals after trying to get it from Infinite Esports and Entertainment in 2019. Intrigued to hear your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Really interesting stuff to me. What would that team have looked like? Given this would have been under the Envy umbrella, I imagine, would Hastra have allowed Hector too much control within the team? I imagine certainly some conflicts would have arisen there, and it'd be kind of a funny thing to witness, but yeah, certainly to the benefit of the Call of Duty community, I believe that it did not. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, I'd greatly appreciate a like on the video. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm know you enjoyed this content. Other people like you may enjoy this content as well, and help grow the competitive Call of Duty community. Thank you for watching as always, take care, and I will see you next time.
The trophy about you can...
Close hill, I hit him with an aid. Somewhere, I think he's in the
Mid-box,
right.
mid-box.
Nice.
Mid-box didn't kill for me.
He's not
He backed
mid-box.
up then.
He was never there. We're doing the
One guy orange,
test spot.
banana, one guy
I hit him
banana.
with an aid.
mid plane. He's hitting fast. He could go top left wing.
Top left wing, not peeking.
Top left wing, he's there, he's
And
there.
there's
I'm
inside
dead.
hill. Inside hill lying down. All hurt.
Top plane. Yeah, top plane spot. He hit fast. He hit the top plane fast. He's blind to you.
Last guy, last guy.
Yeah, last guy's hitting too.
I'm dead.